warm welcome. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. As always, we have a packed show for you. Let's begin with our big focus, which is on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Qatar. Prime Minister Narendra Modi today concluded his visit to Qatar, which he said has added a new vigor to the bilateral friendship and underlined that India looks forward to scaling up cooperation with the Gulf nation in key sectors like trade, investment, technology and culture. Prime Minister Modi's visit was significant as it came a week after Qatar released 8 Indian nationals who were sentenced to death after being arrested in that country in August 2022. During his less than 24-hour visit, his second since 2014, Prime Minister Modi held wide-ranging talks with the Qatari Emir, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, primarily focusing on significantly expanding India-Qatar ties in areas of trade, energy, investment and new technology. Prime Minister Modi posted on X a video wrap of his engagements in the Gulf country. The message read, "My visit to Qatar has added new vigor to the India-Qatar friendship. India looks forward to scaling up cooperation in key sectors relating to trade, investment, technology and culture. I thank the government and people of Qatar for their hospitality. I had a wonderful meeting with the Emir. He reviewed the full range of India-Qatar relations and discussed ways to deepen cooperation across various sectors. Our nations also look forward to collaborating in futuristic sectors which will benefit our planet." That's what he said. Now, Prime Minister Modi also met with Father Amir Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani in Doha earlier in the day. The Ministry of External Affairs said the Prime Minister congratulated Father Amir on his visionary leadership that paved the way for Qatar's development over the past decades. The two leaders held discussions on India-Qatar ties. The Prime Minister also invited Emir Hamad Al Thani to visit India. Prime Minister Modi had reached Doha late on Wednesday after a whirlwind tour of the UAE, where he addressed a well-attended Indian community event, the prestigious World Government Summit, and also inaugurated UAE's first Hindu stone temple, amongst other engagements.
This morning, there were 3 key and significant elements of Prime Minister's program. The first was a ceremonial welcome. Honorable Prime Minister was accorded a ceremonial welcome at the Amiri Diwan, where His Highness Amir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani received him. Thereafter, the ceremonial guard of honor was presented to the Prime Minister. The two leaders thereafter held detailed discussions, first in a delegation level format and then in the restricted format. The topics of discussion included a wide range of areas of bilateral cooperation, including trade partnership, investment cooperation, energy partnership, issues engaged in regional security, cultural affinity and people-to-people ties. In this, when the two leaders spoke, they spoke about the need for strategic investments and strategic partnership in the field of energy and technology and to proceed beyond the bilateral relationship in this field. They also discussed issues of regional and international importance. The two leaders, of course, recalled their last meeting on the sidelines of COP28 last December. Prime Minister thanked His Highness the Amir for his support for the welfare of the Indian community, and in this regard expressed his deep appreciation to His Highness the Amir for the release of 8 Indian nationals of Al Dhara Company. We are extremely gratified to see them back in India. Honorable Prime Minister invited His Highness the Amir to pay a visit to India. His Highness the Amir also hosted a banquet lunch at the palace in honor of Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's visit to Qatar is focused on one, consolidating the wide-ranging partnership that India and Qatar have across different fields of economic cooperation, to also, through the visit this time, build on the gains of 2016 visit, build on the gains achieved through subsequent high-level political exchanges between the two countries, and lay a foundation for what the two countries, driven by the strong leaderships of His Highness the Amir and the Prime Minister of India, can achieve in months and years ahead, in a manner that not only expands the areas of bilateral cooperation, but also increases convergences on regional issues, also looks at a partnership across in third countries, and whatever we're doing in a bilateral space, we look at that from a strategic perspective rather than from a transactional.
All right. So, what is the significance of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Qatar, which came a day after his two-day visit to the UAE, two countries in the Middle East that India has built strong ties with under Prime Minister Modi's leadership over the last decade? To discuss that, I'm now joined by Dr. Wael Awad, Strategic Affairs expert, West Asia. He joins me from New Delhi tonight. We're also hoping to be joined later on the show by Ambassador Sheikh Sharma, former Indian diplomat, and Professor Manoj Pant, director at the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. Dr. Wael Awad, welcome back to Global Lens. Great to have you on the show, sir. Let's first look at the big picture before we talk about Qatar in particular. How would you, assess Prime Minister Modi's three-day visit to these two important Gulf nations? The fact that, of course, talking about the UAE, the Prime Minister visited that country for the 7th time in 8 years. Qatar is also a country that we've built a much stronger relationship with over time. And the fact that, now there is plenty of evidence to suggest that India has stronger ties with the Arab world than ever before. How do you look at it?
Thank you, Neha. I think you have already answered half of the questions you said, which is related to the Arab-India relationship, which is bonded in history for centuries, which have been really fostering over the years. But yes, having said that, I would say the prime ministers of India, Narendra Modi, have facilitated in bringing back the bridges between the nations of India and the Arab world, particularly in the GCC country, because he was the first prime minister to visit the country after 38 years in 2015. So a repeated visit by himself, and then the award he was given by most of each nation is really reflect the bond and the cordial relation that India have developed with the Arab world. Not to speak of the Indian diaspora, which is already play a major role in the area. We have more than 8 million Indian are residing in the Gulf state. We have more than 14 million Indian visit the states and more than $70 billion revenue. And these Indian expats have been contributing to the welfare of the people in their country. And there is integration of the Indian community within the community of the Gulf country. Remember that the Indian community is the largest expat in the Gulf country. In fact, it has exceeded many of the countries, even their population. In Qatar, they are more than double the population. In Emirates, they are 3.5 million also. So to speak of all, this is how it shows how much trusted the Indian community there. And so I think the Prime Minister visit to UAE has given a modern model to the rest of the world and to the rest of the countries, that the fostering relations in the economy and the political and the cultural and also in the security can be a model to play and to implement in another country. So he has finished a very successful and historic visit to UAE, and then followed by Qatar, which is also, Neha, is the after the release of the 8 Indian prisoners, and that is also by his personal intervention and with the backdoor diplomacy, which have played a major role in releasing the 8 Indian. So this is show us also that the Indian foreign policy and South Bloc have shown us a realism and pragmatism, along with the personal touch that the Prime Minister was able to succeed and bring India back to the map of the Arab-India relationship as a whole.
Absolutely, sir, and I'm glad you brought up the issue of those 8, Navy veterans who were recently released from a jail in Qatar. I was going to come to that next because this visit comes in the backdrop of that very significant development. Ambassador Sheikh Sharma, let me ask you, sir. Dr. Awad says that the Prime Minister has concluded a historic and a very successful and fruitful trip of the UAE and Qatar in the last 3 days. Now, there was so much shock in India when news first came in of those 8 former Indian Navy personnel being sentenced to death by a court in Qatar on espionage charges. Of course, the Modi government intervened and first their sentences were commuted. And then suddenly earlier this week, there was great news when we learned that 7 of those 8 men had already returned home to India and all of them had been released from jail. Now, that does say a lot about how the fact that Prime Minister Modi has personally invested in these relationships between India and the Arab world has paid off. The investment that he's made, the personal capital that he's put into this. How significant do you think that development has been, because it's been described as a huge diplomatic victory for India? And then even what we saw in the UAE, Abu Dhabi getting its first Hindu temple, the Prime Minister of India inaugurating it, the Prime Minister of India and the President of UAE constantly referring to each other as brother. Clearly, India-Arab ties have come a very long way under the Modi government.
Yes, indeed. What you say is, Neha, very correct. The Arab world believes in real brotherhood, in the sense that, they like to relate always very closely. They are not like the Westerners who have a certain formality and they're very cordial, but heart-to-heart connection is missing. Here, if you establish a heart-to-heart connection and if you reach out, they respond wholeheartedly. Now, that has been the case with PM, like in the case of UAE. He's been to 7 times to UAE in the past 10 years and 3 times in the past 1 year. And with Qatar, India's Prime Minister has visited twice, where there was a, there was a desert. For years and decades, there was no Prime Minister of India visiting Qatar. So our Prime Minister visiting there, and the the Gulf countries, they read about India, they are alert, and Qatar particularly is a very geopolitically very smart, very savvy. They have been doing lots of things in the Middle East. They have been doing diplomacy, mediating. They have been part of the team which has been working to get peace between Israel and Hamas. And so they are savvy. And when India comes there, they appreciate it very deeply. So, and then when this Navy veterans were, as you mentioned, sentenced to death, it was a shock to India. And those of us who have dealt with the Gulf countries, we knew that only at the top level can you work and it can be resolved. Because there the government and regime is such that they have, the Emir decides many things. So it was just as well that that intervention from India was at the highest level, and they appreciated it, and that's how not only the sentence were commuted, but finally they were released and they came to India. It has gone a long way. It has gone a long way to forge the relationship between the two countries. And the other thing about, in UAE, Prime Minister was received by the president and who was the crown prince when he first visited in 2015. So, there is a bond which is growing every time you meet. And the whole culture there is that when you are friendly, then you come freely, come often. And they say in Arabic, kulli yawm tal. That means every day come, and their doors are open. So we also, PM has been playing that, that informality and that closeness. And it has worked. It has worked because the Gulf countries, and traditionally, historically, they have been close to India. The Gulf gap is not very far, and hundreds of years we have sailors going to Gulf, and they're coming to the Malabar coast. So they know India very well, and in the Arabic language also, the name for India is Al-Hind, and it is not many countries which have a definite article before their name. So India is very special for them. And that special India, when they come and with the, with the warmth and cordiality and humility, they are very impressed that India is not trying to outsmart them or to be one up on them. And they also find that India and our diplomacy has been successful in conveying to them that we have no ulterior motive. All our aims are for mutual interest and for mutual respect, mutual sensitivity, and to further the all-encompassing relationship between us, economic, trade, investment, and the strategic partnership, as the Foreign Secretary very succinctly, explained. This relationship it touches every aspect, and they like it. Like they would like to work on, we are importing the LNG from liquefied natural gas from Qatar, and about 70% of our demand are met from that Qatar export to India. We want to increase that, and they want to work with India on energy and future energy, in the sense that the energy transition which would enable us to cope with the climate change. So they want to invest in India, and same is true with the UAE. So these investment relationship, then trade relationship, then there is this technology. We are today at the cusp of a completely new era of technology, which now it is a buzzword, artificial intelligence. But the AI is actually touching on every aspect of our social and economic life. How industry reacts to it, how society accepts it. These are important issues, and we need a certain understanding and coming together of the countries who are involved. So our forging a common understanding of these issues with the Gulf countries, with UAE, with Qatar, is very, very important.
Very important indeed, yes. And the Prime Minister has made it abundantly clear that this relationship is a major foreign policy priority for him. I will come back to you, Ambassador. Let me now go across to Professor Manoj Pant, former Vice Chancellor of the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. Thank you very much, Professor Pant, for joining me on Global Lens. Good to have you. As has been mentioned by Ambassador Shrikant Sharma, there are many important aspects to India's relationship with the Arab world. There is the geopolitics and the security aspect, and then there is the economic and trade aspect. I've been going through some statistics. India and Qatar have always enjoyed strong economic ties. Qatar has been the largest supplier of liquefied natural gas to India, accounting for more than 50% of India's LNG imports. Of course, we have a massive Indian diaspora of close to 9 million in the Gulf countries, and 840,000 in Qatar alone. I came across another very interesting fact in my research, that when Qatar was isolated and feeling the heat of the Saudi Arabia-led blockade between 2017 and 2021, India is one country that continued with its economic engagement with Doha. And of course, let's not forget that during the G20 summit in September last year, there was a very significant announcement of the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. And in that context, a regulatory framework has been set up. An MOU has been signed between India and the UAE just 2 days ago during the Prime Minister's latest visit. Now, the question really is, how much do you believe that Prime Minister Modi has successfully built on this very critical relationship that India shares with the Arab world at large?
Hey, Neha, it's not just India and Qatar. Remember, Qatar has a very important role.
Yeah.
Qatar shares a naval border with the UAE. UAE is as far as I know, the third largest trade partner.
Yes.
Now, Qatar is the other country apart from Muscat, which we call the Arab world. There's a big difference between the Arab and the non-Arab world. So we've got our ties with the non-Arab world, if you want to call it UAE, and now we are building ties with the Arab world. Secondly, remember, Indians, you already told everyone the number of Indians. There are Indians who have a very high respect in the Arab world, particularly both in Muscat and in Qatar. They are among the top guys running the businesses there. So that's the first thing. There's a people-to-people contact is probably greatest between India and Qatar than any other of the Middle East countries. Next, let's take it that they are also part of the IAE, the corridor that we are building for trade between India via Qatar, via the Middle East to Europe. So they are a very important linchpin in our general, not just strategic, but economic planned links with the Middle East. So I do believe it's a very significant step. The fact that he got, it's not easy in Arab countries once they make a ruling on something like death penalty or anything, life sentence, to get them to withdraw it. I think it's a major achievement. It obviously shows that even for them, the Indian relationship is becoming extremely important. And I believe that it is, Qatar is a gateway. You already know what Qatar is doing in solving the problem. Well, mediating in the
Israel-Hamas war.
So in all these things, remember, India also plays a very important part of our foreign policy. Forget just the economics. The LNG part is okay, but there are other sources. So economics is not the dominant factor here. Well, it's important. I think the political strategic links between India and the Middle East, on that both Qatar and Muscat actually, although not so in Muscat, is very important given the very, very large number of Indians who are settled in dominant positions. They are not in small positions. Many of them are board members, many of them are MDs, CEOs, and for example, in Muscat, they are CEOs of all top companies. So
there was a time when there was an impression that Indians going to Gulf countries were mostly blue-collar workers. That has changed.
Gone completely. They don't have the oil. They don't have the oil to do all that. That's gone. That's the whole story. That may still exist to a certain extent with some of the UAE countries. Certainly not with either Muscat or with Qatar. Certainly not.
Absolutely. Many of them occupy top positions in corporate boardrooms, and they are contributing to the economies of those countries. And of course, they're sending huge remittances back home to India. So it is a mutually beneficial relationship at multiple levels. And since complete your point, sir.
I said 100%. The whole issue is that it is not just, as I said, India, Qatar. India has been they are part of the Gulf Cooperation Council, right?
Yeah.
And India has been building up towards having a free trade agreement with the Gulf Cooperation Council. They've begun with the UAE, which is doing very well. It's the third largest trade partner. Now they've already got links with with Qatar, establishing links with Qatar. They already have links with Muscat. So we've got a very nice link with both the Arab and, if you want to call it, the non-Arab but Muslim part of the Middle East. And so this is a very important part. It's critical to our link to Europe, the new naval route that we are planning, the new
and many believe that this India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor, which is being planned, is in a sense expected to be a counterweight to China's BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. But since you talked about the importance of the geopolitical dimension of this relationship, we will discuss that with our panel, but on the other side of this very short break. Stay with us.
From fragile 5 to top 5, from a laggard to a leader, India under Modi has reimagined the world order. Presenting the second edition of TV9, What India Thinks Today. Summit theme, India poised for the next big leap. Listen to Prime Minister Modi unveil his vision for Viksit Bharat at News9 Global Summit, a TV9 network initiative.
20,000 people dead and counting. What's happening in the United States of America is unprecedented. You will have to pay for this.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
We are trying a lot of experiments, innovations and ideas.
We came out with a new format in audio, which is audio series.
Listening for content-oriented company in India, which is a very unique proposition.
When you look at audio in general, we had music, which is like extremely old format, and then we had podcasts.
A natural extension to Pocket FM is to move from Hindi to regional content. I think I'd love to see their FY24 numbers, which they claim will be close to 1,000 crores. I think there are talks of them to raise another $80 to $100 million of funding.
This and more. Streaming on News9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
Bangalore traffic is an example of something that has gone wrong with our system.
We have more than 50 flyovers in Bangalore city. If flyover is a solution to traffic problem, Bangalore should not have traffic problem.
According to TomTom Traffic Index 2022, Bangalore is ranked as the second worst city in the world when it comes to traffic.
The speed limit at the ORR is 80 kilometers per hour, but our vehicle has only moved 10 kilometers per hour.
What Bangalore needs is a surgery, but what we have been offered repeatedly are band-aids.
Only on the world's first news OTT. News9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है तो सुनिए, सीखना है तो पूछिए, और कमाना है तो खरीदिए। जानकारी, सलाह और निवेश सब एक ही सुपर ऐप पर। पैसे का सवाल है तो जवाब है Money9। आजादी पैसे की, अभी डाउनलोड करें।
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing Prime Minister Narendra Modi's just concluded visit to the UAE and Qatar. Let me go back to Dr. Wael Awad at this point. Dr. Awad, if you just look at the big picture once again, we're talking about how significant, the order of the Qatari court was when it decided to set free those 8 Indians who had actually initially been sentenced to death. It took the intervention of the Modi government, and now it is being touted as a big diplomatic win for India. The fact that, the president of the UAE donates half of the land that's been used to build Abu Dhabi's first Hindu temple. The Prime Minister of India goes there and inaugurates that temple. We're also talking about how the Prime Minister of India has personally invested in this relationship between India and many Gulf nations. also given the fact that there's a lot of camaraderie between him and these leaders. The question I want to ask you is, the growing India-Arab ties are quite evident. How do you think this reflects India's growing stature on the global stage today? And if I may also ask you, how do you think a country like Pakistan looks at this growing relationship?
I think India, for the last 2 decades, have shown a very respectable position in the international arena. And for the last 1 decade, we have seen India as a brand. Now, everybody talk of India as a destination for investment, for an alternative even to China, and a more stable, largest democracy in the world. All these factors contribute to India, plus the English language, plus the diversity of India. So all these are factors which contribute to India's success story internationally. And I think India is also using its soft power approach, not only in the Gulf state, but everywhere where the Indian diaspora is available, or they have been contributing and they have been well integrated into the society where they are being in any respected country. So I think, Neha, this is a message India has given to the world, and that's why everybody say, let's act India. So this is where the direction is. So I think the Prime Minister played a major role in the reapproachment and taking care of each citizen of India. Whenever he go, wherever he go, he will always make it a priority to meet with the Indian community and chat with them and interact. So therefore, the Gulf country play a major role in that sense, because you have the largest community based in the Gulf country. They are good workers, they are working very good, and they are also contributing, as I said. So this is one of the success story of India we have to see. And I think this is make India envious by many nations, including Pakistan or China, because India have kept an equal distance from all the nations. They have not interfered in any interfighting among the Arab nations. And also they are also making sure that cross-border terrorism, extremism has been, a zero tolerance in India. So therefore, many of these countries see India as a stabilizing factor in the Gulf countries, especially with the American leaving a vacuum there, of security vacuum, where the Gulf country felt that India could be the alternative to the United States, where they can make the security there. And I think that the Indian warships has already been guarding. They have the station. There are training, defense training, and there are also military training between India, exercises between India and each of the Gulf countries. So therefore, this is one of the important. I think there are 3 issues here also we have to look. It's India energy security, it's India food security, and expat security, which has also made India have the proactive role to reapproach in the Middle East and on West Asia. So this is a natural extension of India, barring the 76 years ago, where India was a subcontinent and it was extended through Iran into the Gulf country and the rest of the Middle East, or what we call it, the West Asia. So I think that is what makes India different and unique. And finally, I would say that India has never been a colonial state. So therefore, that also gives India an advantage of a civilization and a civilization dialogue between India and the Arab world.
Well, that's a very interesting and comprehensive analysis indeed. India is not seen as a threat to any country. We do not have expansionist designs on anyone, unlike a country like China. Therefore, you believe India is seen as a stabilizing force in the region. It's very interesting you say that many countries have this Act India approach now. Ambassador Shrikant Sharma, I want to ask you this. There was a time when on a regular basis, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation Nations would get together and, at the behest of Pakistan, condemn India and rake up the Kashmir issue. Then, of course, subsequently, we saw complete dehyphenation of India and Pakistan happening. Now, we seem to have come such a long way since those days, not only because India is a rising global power economically, which frankly Pakistan cannot even dream of competing with today, given the economic mess that Pakistan is in currently. But, you know, today you have one Gulf nation after another rolling out the red carpet for the Indian Prime Minister. The presidents of those nations referring to Prime Minister Modi as their brother, you know, wooing the Prime Minister and building stronger economic and trade and security ties with India. You would agree we've come a long way, a lot has changed since those days, but would it be correct to say that this is a relationship which was perhaps for very long neglected by previous Indian governments, and Prime Minister Modi somehow came into office in 2014 and decided to make it a priority area?
You know, the success story so far is due to the very personal leadership, of Prime Minister, and the diplomacy is led by him. It is all the time he ensures that whatever is necessary is done. Then his own outreach to the leadership of these countries has been tremendous. Phenomenal outreach. The Qatar 2 visits, UAE 7 visits, 3 visits in the course of past year, and then the idiom, Prime Minister's idiom, his talk is always constructive. We are not into a zero-sum game with anyone. India is not enlisting these countries for any highfalutin competition, G2 or something. We are not trying to reach to high heavens to be the superpower. But we are working to comprehensively develop 140 crore people of India for their welfare, for their, for their prosperity. And in that process, these, our population, our expatriates, they contribute to the nation building and development and prosperity of the host countries. They are an asset because they are trusted and they don't pose any problems to them. And now generations have come in the Gulf, the well springs of our relationship go to centuries because they are so close. Maritime proximity, maritime neighborhood has been very prominent, and it's not now, but for hundreds of years. Now, present government harnesses that connection, and that civilizational message is also put across that Indians are with you. They are not against you. They are not to be one up on you. They work with you. That kind of a thing, sabka saath, sabka vikas, this mantra of Prime Minister is so profound that they all realize the value of it, that we are together with you, we want to work together to move forward, and we want to have the trust, So this is and in the present uncertain geopolitics of the world, where tensions abide, where conflicts abide, warfare, violence, here is a country which talks about that this is not the era of war. This is not the era of fighting. We talk about peace and diplomacy.
And we talk about Vasudev Kutumbakam.
And Vasudev Kutumbakam, and also the thing that, this, they say, Satyam Bruyat, Priyam Bruyat. That means say truth and say something which is pleasant. So India makes it very clear that when they reach out to them, the conversation is very pleasant. It is not na bruyat asatyam apriyam. That means we should not speak either untruth or unpleasant things. Yes. We keep out unpleasantness. And look at this, the impact of that is that the Emir of Qatar, he sees the value of Prime Minister's intervention and orders release of these
men
veterans
who are on the death row. This is very rare, to see that men who have been condemned to death then find themselves being released from jail altogether. Now, if that is not a testament to the very strong relationship that exists between India and the Arab world, then perhaps nothing is. Let me give the last word to Professor Manoj Pant as we wrap up this conversation. Professor Pant, as has been very rightly pointed out by the other two panelists, yes, in India says Vasudev Kutumbakam, the world is one family. We do not pose a security threat to any other country. We're not eyeing anyone else's territory. We do not have expansionist designs on anyone. We don't want to be a hegemony. We believe in live and let live. And of course, we're the world's largest democracy. But that apart, to what extent do you think India's growing economic prosperity, the India growth story, has contributed to the strengthening of its ties with the Arab world?
Okay, let's face first of all, the facts. I believe India's soft power is much larger than its hard power. Because in trade, we are not that dominant. We are small, but in IT, we are dominant, one. Secondly, the second part, what you said, is more important. Not as if how important we are in world trade, which we are not, but we're extremely important in terms of the future of world trade. But this is where the consumers are. You know, the way China is going, and is headed down very fast. The only two countries today where the population is positive, and that's important from the demand side. Remember, people are consumers apart from producers, are India and the USA, two countries where populations are growing. So the strategic, the geopolitics is implicit in the very strong soft power that we have in the Middle East now and in the USA. Don't underestimate the way Indian soft power is increasing in the USA and in Europe. And the fact that today, frankly, if countries don't come to India, given what's happened to China, where would they go? So, you know, we are literally in the driver's seat now as far as that's where the world is looking at. So it's not as if we are a dominant economic power today. We are not. But we are the future economic power. There's no doubt. There is no one else unless a new country emerges on the planet.
Absolutely. So India is the future in many ways. Many countries are betting on India, and let's not forget there is a China factor there. That's the elephant in the room, which is why country after country, especially the United States, have decided to invest in India, build closer ties with India, because at the end of the day, these countries do see India as a countervailing force against an increasingly expansionist and aggressive and belligerent China. On that note, Ambassador Shilkant Sharma, Dr. Vail Awad and Professor Manoj Pant, thank you so much for joining me on Global Lens tonight. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you. All right, let's now shift our focus to our neighboring country, Pakistan, which recently held a very controversial and inconclusive election. Amidst political uncertainty, even a week after the elections in Pakistan, a key aide of former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan today said that the jailed leader has nominated Omar Ayub Khan as the PTI's prime ministerial candidate. The elections threw up a hung verdict, with no political party managing a majority, but Imran Khan stunned everyone, as independent candidates backed by him won at least 92 of the 264 seats, making them the largest group in the new National Assembly. Imran Khan has ruled out alliances with the three largest political parties, which means that his prime ministerial candidate currently does not have the numbers to form the government. Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, or PTI, has said it would reach out to other parties to discuss supporting Omar Ayub's candidature. But will that really fructify in government formation? What's important is that Imran Khan's opponents, the PMLN and the PPP, have already announced an alliance to form a minority government. Imran Khan's supporters ran as independents because they were barred by the Election Commission on technical grounds from contesting the polls under his party's electoral symbol. But despite the ban and the former Premier's imprisonment in multiple cases, millions of his supporters came out to vote for him. As for Omar Ayub, the PTI's prime ministerial candidate, he's currently in hiding and is wanted in various investigations by law enforcement, including charges of being a part of rioting that followed Imran Khan's arrest last year. Ayub is the grandson of Pakistan's first military dictator, Ayub Khan. Meanwhile, in a surprise development, PMLN leader Nawaz Sharif, who was widely expected to become the next Prime Minister, has instead nominated his brother and former Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif for the top job. The PMLN is the largest recognized party with 75 seats in the National Assembly. The Pakistan People's Party, or the PPP, holds the second position with 54 seats. Combined, these two parties have sufficient seats to secure a simple majority in the 266-seat legislature. Earlier this week, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari withdrew from the prime ministerial race and announced that his party would endorse any nominee put forward by the PMLN. The PPP announced its decision to back Sharif's party in establishing a minority government, resolving a deadlock following last week's inconclusive elections. Bhutto has also stated that his party would refrain from joining the cabinet. For now, This alliance may have quelled concerns regarding government formation after the polls yielded a divided outcome and raised fears of renewed instability in Pakistan. However, most still believe that a government of this nature cannot provide the stability that Pakistan needs.
तय किया है कि हम आपस में मिल बैठ के हुकूमत बनाएंगे, इंशाअल्लाह पाकिस्तान को मुश्किलों से निकालेंगे। रिकन्सिलिएशन भी करनी है और रिकन्सिलिएशन में पीटीआई भी शामिल है। ये नहीं है कि हम चाहते हैं कि पीटीआई रिकन्सिलिएशन में ना आए, वो भी आए। हर पॉलिटिकल फोर्स रिकन्सिलिएशन में आए।
अब पार्लियामान अब मार्ज वजूद में आने वाली है और अब हमारी जो जंग है वो इस मुल्क के जो चैलेंजेस हैं उनके ख़िलाफ़ सबसे पहला चैलेंज इस मुल्क के नंबर 1 में समझता हूँ वो हमारी इकॉनमी है। उसको हमने पाँव पे खड़ा करना है, जो कि एक बज़ात ख़ुद एक हमालिया नुमा एक चैलेंज है।
From one election to another, let's now shift our focus to Indonesia, that recently concluded the world's largest single-day election. And the man widely seen as the frontrunner, controversial strongman and the country's defense minister, Prabowo Subianto, has claimed victory. This presidential election is a dramatic moment in Indonesia's history. Even though polls placed him as the frontrunner for several weeks even before polling day, the margin by which he beat his two opponents was much higher than expected. Most pollsters have projected that Subianto will be comfortably over the 50% threshold needed to win outright in the first round. The final count still needs to be officially confirmed, but most Indonesians will now accept that the next 5 years will be under President Prabowo. The transition from one administration to another is a slow one in Indonesia. It will take the Election Commission up to a month to confirm the results. And the inauguration of the new president does not take place until October. There will be many months of intense negotiations to decide what kind of government Prabowo will form. And while his win in the presidential race appears to be an emphatic one, Prabowo's party, Gerindra, is currently projected to win only 13% of the seats in parliament. He will need to persuade other parties to back him in order to have a working majority in the legislature to get laws passed, which means offering inducements in the form of cabinet positions is something that we can expect to see. Some of those parties supported rival presidential candidates in this election. Outgoing President Joko Widodo was a master of coalition politics, co-opting his opponents so that in his last term of office he was backed by more than 80% of MPs. This smoothed away political conflict and allowed him to push through his ambitious infrastructure projects, and also created what some have called opposition-less politics, where no one challenged the government's agenda. The question many are asking is, will Prabowo, a less compliant leader, try the same big tent approach to governing? And what kind of relationship will he have with Megawati Sukarnoputri, the grand dame of Indonesian politics and leader of the largest party, the PDIP? The PDIP was President Jokowi's main parliamentary sponsor during his tenures in office and was shocked by his switch to the Prabowo camp last year, causing a lot of ill feeling. A lot depends on whether Megawati is ready to be in the opposition, whether she can be induced to bury the hatchet and join the ruling coalition, and whether Prabowo wants that in the first place. There are also questions over the future relationship between Prabowo and President Jokowi. Now, the latter still enjoys enviable popularity ratings, and his support played a critical part in the success of the Prabowo campaign, bringing over huge numbers of voters who might otherwise have backed the PDIP candidate. In return, his son, Gibran Raka Buming Raka, was made Prabowo's running mate in this election, though only after a much criticized court ruling exempting him from the constitutionally mandated age threshold. Now, if something were to incapacitate Prabowo, who at 72 years old is in uncertain health, the inexperienced Gibran would succeed him and might be expected to rely on his father's help. Prabowo's personality is unlike that of the current president, except perhaps their Machiavellian understanding of political power. Where the current president is famously soft-spoken and conciliatory, Prabowo has a reputation for ill-tempered outbursts and abrasive opinions. He takes pride in the long career he had as an officer in the Indonesian Special Forces, despite allegations of serious human rights abuses that were made against him and his unit in the past. Now, many Indonesians view a Prabowo presidency with alarm. The Human Rights Watch says his impulse, his instinct is to be xenophobic, to be an authoritarian leader. There are fears that he will not change, his character will not change. That's what the Human Rights Watch has said.
Indonesia's Prabowo Subianto declared victory on Wednesday in the country's hotly contested presidential election. This victory must be the victory of the people of Indonesia, the 72-year-old said. The ex-Special Forces commander took nearly 60% of the vote, according to unofficial counts by independent pollsters that have proven to be accurate in the past. The world's biggest single-day election saw nearly 260,000 candidates duke it out over more than 20,000 posts. Prabowo appeared to have an insurmountable lead over his rivals, ex-governors Anies Baswedan and Ganjar Pranowo. Anies, for one, said he was waiting for the official tally, which is set to be announced by March 20th.
Proses penghitungan belum selesai.
The counting process is not finished, he said, adding, "We will respect the results of the people's aspirations."
Dari aspirasi rakyat.
In the 1990s, Prabowo was feared as a top lieutenant of the late strongman Suharto, who ruled Indonesia as an autocrat for 3 decades. Prabowo has since transformed his image into a softer, more grandfatherly figure. He's attracted a huge youth following on social media in a country where nearly half of the 205 million strong electorate is under 40. Another boost for him? The tacit backing of the wildly popular incumbent Joko Widodo. He's reached his term limit. Jokowi, as he's known, did not explicitly endorse a candidate, but his son is Prabowo's running mate. The pair have pledged to continue Jokowi's efforts to position the resource-rich G20 economy as a hub for electric vehicles, as well as to extend a massive infrastructure and social assistance push and create millions of jobs. Prabowo's rivals had said they were investigating reports of fraud, but did not provide evidence. Analysts have said there were no signs of electoral fraud. If confirmed, the new president will take office in October.
The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Let's now get you the latest on the Israel-Hamas war. Israeli special forces have entered Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, according to both the Israeli Defense Forces and the Hamas-run Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip. The IDF said they apprehended a number of suspects in the hospital. IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari said they had credible intelligence from a number of sources, including from released hostages, that Hamas had previously held hostages at this hospital and that the bodies of the deceased hostages may still be present there. The military did not publicly release that evidence. Hagari claimed that Hamas terrorists are likely hiding behind injured civilians inside Nasser Hospital right now and said the operation would be precise and limited. Dr. Ashraf Al-Qidra, spokesperson for the Health Ministry, said the Israeli occupation storming the Nasser Medical Complex and turning it into a military barracks after demolishing the southern wall and entering from it is going to be devastating for the patients there. Israeli military bulldozers are digging up the mass graves that had been dug inside the complex walls, says Dr. Al-Qidra. This comes a day after hundreds of civilians were forced by Israeli forces to leave the hospital, which they had been using as a shelter. Doctors and medical officials say Israeli snipers have shot dead several people as they tried to leave the hospital complex over recent days.
We are committed to finding and returning the bodies of those hostages in Gaza. we conduct precise rescue operations as we have in the past, where our intelligence indicates that the bodies of hostages may be held. We have credible intelligence from a number of sources, including from released hostages, indicating that Hamas held hostages at the Nasser hospital in Khan Yunis, and that there may be bodies of our hostages in the Nasser hospital facility. Hamas systematically uses hospitals as terror hubs. According to intelligence assessments and information we gathered on the ground, over 85% of major medical facilities in Gaza have been used by Hamas for terror operations. This sensitive operation was prepared with precision and is being conducted by IDF special forces who underwent specified training for this mission. A key objective, as defined by our military mission, is to ensure that the Nasser hospital continues its important functions of treating Gazan patients.
That's all the time we have on this edition of Global Lens. Thanks so much for watching. Do join us again at the same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.
Currently, the industry is facing a lot of challenges as far as demand is concerned. Basically, the US markets has slowed down because of high inflation.
So obviously, diamonds being a dream product, something which doesn't have a utility value or is seen as a luxury. So that obviously goes off your shopping list. That's the first item that will go off your shopping list, especially in recessionary trends.
That lab-grown diamonds are not mined, and they do away with the entire mining. So they save up on all the environmental damage that is associated with mining, and of course, the mining cost, which is why they're even more affordable.
People that is impacted by all these recessions are the artisans, are the people who work in this industry, right? But I think lab-grown diamond has allowed them to actually use their skills in the same product.
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
जानना है तो देखिए, समझना है